Hey everyone, hope you're doing well. So, if you've listened to me for any amount of time, you'll know I hate bootlickers of any kind. They're one of the most pathetic aspects of having to interact with this reality. They're the people who probably will never be unbrainwashed. Like they're committed to it till death, you know? And more, because people are so fed up with how things are, they they look to their grandparents' age and they were like, oh, look at them. They were so functional and happy and blah, 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 blah. And it's this nostalgia for an age that never was. And the funny thing is, in our grandparents' time, their older generations were saying the exact same things that our generation is saying, our old generation is saying about us. It happens every new generation. They say the same shit always. Oh, these kids are lazy. Oh, these kids are, uh, they don't care about tradition. They don't care about this. They don't care about that. And the thing is, it's true because you literally cannot reproduce a tradition unbroken in the exact same fashion that it was practiced like a fucking 1,000 years ago, or really even 500 years ago, to be honest. It's very few exceptions that exist like that. And it makes sense because how I interact with the world and my experiences and uh my favorite practices, I guess, I'm probably gonna be able to hand some over to my child if I ever decided to have one, which I won't. But as an example, you would hand that over to your child, and your child is going to interact with them very differently. You know, our parents didn't have uh all the technology that we have. Uh Okay, my parents were kind of oldish by the time that uh CD players like Walkmans came out, like radio. Wait, yeah, there was Walkmans and then there was Discmans, like really fucking creative names there, you know, videotape. Okay, like there's a massive cupboard in my house that is just full of videotapes, tapes of like different shows, like really old shows or really old movies, and they're all handwritten, like what the movie is, what season it is, what episode, how long it is, and it's like all my dad's handwriting. So I'm thinking like when they finally were able to afford a TV, they just sat down and just like watched all the favorite shows and just taped everything they could. They didn't know Netflix was gonna come around, and like even now the videotapes just lie there because we no longer use videotapes anymore. We have digital TV, and if the older generations could see them now, they'd be like, oh, look at them. We knew they would become so decadent and blah 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 blah. Shut up. Of course they would. And it's so strange because now you have so many people that look at like Gen Z or the millennials, and they're like, our grandfathers were dying in the war at 15. They were in the trenches and they were firing bullets at one another, and they were dodging bullets. And I'm like, how psychotic do you have to be to not realize what you just said? Yeah, and in early 20th century England, children were fucking dying in chimneys. Is that what you want to go back to? Is that Do you want to go back to a time where the child mortality rate was like in the high double digits? Because what other alternative is there to what currently exists right now? Heck, just move to another country, move to a fucking war-torn country, and you'll get your fucking uh teenage child soldier, or just child soldier blood fantasy, it's such a delusional ass mindset, and I hate it so much. You Mostly also because, especially in Western countries, like people do not understand the effect the Cold War had on Western countries and their their culture of consumerism. They don't understand, right? The I don't know if you can call it, the Soviet Union was honestly like pretty fucking brutal. It was. You could say alternative to the capitalist regimes that existed, it was better off, but they were literally able to keep up with the United States for decades, you know. If you're talking about economic systems, they were, but at the same time, there was always a human cost to this. And it's, for me, politics itself, politics itself is always going to involve a human cost. Always, without a doubt. Which begs the question, why further push that onto a child who knows nothing about politics, who the existence of them is political in itself, and yet they don't even know that. And this especially, I made this video especially to say that the people who feed into this like mythical man archetype, like this mythical like fucking alpha man archetype, like, oh yeah, we built the like, it is insane. It is so fucking insane to me. The vast majority of the men that say men built the world are literally sitting in their fucking bedrooms or a studio with a microphone recording content all the fucking time. They're not the ones in the sewers. They're not the ones in the fucking digging for oil. They're not the ones on the ships. They're not the ones mining in the fucking in the mineral mines, right? They're not the ones doing it. So how the fuck? Okay, yeah. I don't think it's not really controversial to say that a lot of men died to build the modern world. Now, in what capacity did they die? A lot of them was fucking forced colonial labor, right? They don't ever say that. They don't ever say that shit. They don't. Either just forced labor in one way or another, right? Because what is meant by the modern infrastructure, fine, yes. Like, at least in Africa, most of it was forced colonial labor. And then after that, just like, I don't know, systems of labor just bordering on slavery or just slavery itself. In large parts of Asia as well. And in the West, after World War II, Europe was so destroyed that they had to invite workers from their colonies to come and rebuild the place. Isn't that fucking crazy? I mean, really. And the people who always invoke this, like, men are this and the that, like, it's always the ones sitting on the fucking sidelines or like at the top of the steps, just watching people die and then being like, yeah, I'm one of them. It's literally like a soccer team or a football team. It's like your favorite football team just for genders. You can say men do this, and you can say even right now, like, men die all the fucking time to maintain this hyper consumerist world that we live in. Like, majority of the workplace fatalities are still going to be men. Even so, these men, and this is why I talk about how the definition of masculinity has always constantly flip-flopped over the centuries. Because the kinds of men that they're invoking now, like the big, strong fucking builders of civilization, at one point they were just seen as like almost like cavemen, less than cavemen, just hired hands, essentially. They still are now, don't get it twisted. But they like to invoke them in a means of making, they like to give them this idea that they're all part of this false class consciousness, when they really don't fucking care. Like, the people who are like so passionate in advocating for all the men in these situations they wouldn't even last a fucking day. Like, I've watched videos of like the guys on oil rigs and how like just messy and freaking intense the work is. or coal mining, or even just literally just the sewers, or even just sweeping out garbage around the street. Like a lot of guys just do it without even any protective equipment, and you can say, oh yeah, it's just manhood, bro, till you contract like a new strain of tuberculosis or something, and then it impacts your lived years. It impacts the rest of your life with fucking horrible illnesses. I'm just so sick of the people, and it's always the people who shout the loudest, right? Especially when it comes to like soldiers and war and war. It's always the people that shout the loudest that will be the last ones to join that line, or they will dodge it in some way, or make up some bullshit excuse and to get some medical exemption. And the worst ones are really the corporate bootlickers, because even if you say men built this, the vast majority of the men who built that shit do not own it. They don't. You could say they were hired in some cases, and in most cases, they were just forced to build the shit. Heck, you could even, I mean, to believe that we're capable of doing so much, and we are capable of doing so much, like, building skyscrapers and all these tall ass buildings, even like spaceships, all that. And yet in the Bible, God confused all the languages in the world for like a building that wasn't even as tall as like, I can't remember how tall it was supposed to be. I don't think they ever finished it, but it does exist. It was nothing compared to like if he saw the fucking Burj Khalifa, he would lose his fucking, like his head would fucking explode like a fucking star, you know? In any case, I hate bootlickers for the sole reason that none of you own any of this shit. You like tell me, what power do you even have? What power do you actually own in this society? Don't think about the power that you actually have, because if it was meaningful power, you'd understand that children are not. This is not a place to bring children into, first of all, right? And that's the first lie they fucking they choose to believe, is that they have some sort of stake in this world, that they have to reproduce their gene pool in particular. What do they actually own? Because the majority of people who should be saying this shit are people in the ruling class. They're the ones who own everything. They are the ones who own all the power. But somehow they've convinced the average person to parrot their talking points, to do their legwork on their behalf, to be happy with, like, yeah, I worked 85 hours or like 100 hours last week, just because that's what men do. And I'm like, you congrats, you've just made some like fat fucking capitalist pig incredibly fucking rich at the top, right? For however much money you're making, that the guy at the top's kids is already worth more than you will be in your entire life, as long as you work. Literally, their children are just going to inherit this shit. Thanks for doing the legwork on their behalf, Thanks for being dumb enough to fucking believe that this is actually making a difference in your life. When you believe that you will then hand this off to your child so they can keep making the same fuckers rich. But because of tradition and my fucking legacy and my fucking masculinity, you're just going to keep repeating a horrid fucking cycle. Horrible. Who was it? I think George Carlin said it was either evangelicals or conservatives. Conservatives they love live babies. They want live babies so they can have dead soldiers. Something like that. And it's always stuck with me. It's always fucking stuck with me. Because as much as the concept of abortion has never really sat right with me, because of how arbitrary even the abortion advocates are about abortion itself, it leaves just so much room for well, dehumanization. Because when is it a clump of cells and when is it an actual human being? Is it the intent? Is it the intent behind uh the human? Is that what makes it human? You know? But I do see the criticisms in how conservatives are so fucking up their own rectums about it, because they'll force they'll force the baby to be born, but then they're also against any kind of welfare benefit, welfare, like social welfare, like it, they're against improving any sort of education or healthcare, any sort of metrics that would improve a fucking child's life. They're like, no, defund that, or get the government out of that, get the government. And like, it's all the same shit, man. People actually still believe there's a free market. There's such a thing as a free market. What is like, yo, oh man, fucking freedom of speech, fucking free market capitalism, free everything. You just put freedom in front of everything, and it automatically is gonna sell. That, how does that even make sense? In a place where you need to use money, what is free? Oh, the free exchange of that's not how commodities work, you dumb fuck. I would hope anyone who has two eyes can see why there's no such thing as a free market. Is there a free market in the Democratic Republic of the Congo where children have to literally dig for their fucking lives? Is there a free market there? Does the free market account for the fact that other countries have massive nuclear fucking weapons that can just demand, or just nuclear or armies that they can just invade other countries in and tell them what the fuck, what the fuck to dig for, what the fuck to plant, and what the fuck to buy and sell? People are so, this is so many ways that people are indoctrinated. That's the crazy thing. If you can't sit with yourself and just brainstorm for half an hour about why do you believe what the fuck you believe, where did that thought come from, all this kind of stuff, there's like an intrinsic fear in doing that for a lot of people, which is pretty sad. But the part where it stops being sad is when they become generational bootlickers. That is the legacy. That is the legacy that your fucking kids inherit for you. Is just being a generational bootlicker. Oh yeah, respect your like, respect the church. Oh, respect the government. Respect the police. Respect the fucking military. Why? They're all just blood-soaked pieces of shit. That's like, that is what politics ultimately is who lives, who dies, and why do they die? Why should they die? That is what politics is. It's always so funny to me to see people like conservatives talk about freedom and liberty, and yet they they literally deep throat the fucking military and the police so hard. And they're the most violent aspects of the government by far. Right? Police, you can make some bullshit excuse like they're just protecting people and blah blah blah, which legally they don't have to, by the way. If you didn't know, they don't have any obligation to protect you at all, legally speaking. Right? But the military is just overtly the most violent part. You can say, oh, we're defending the country, but really it's just you're trying to see how far you can get with your military to get your neighbors to do what the fuck you want. There's such an issue of compartmentalization and just it's like we have one brain, sure, we have two hemispheres, but the way people operate, it's like they have like 16 different hemispheres and none of them ever touch. So they can say one thing and then another thing, even though they're completely contradictory, they can believe both things are related and are coherent. It's really it is something, it is really something to marvel, honestly. You should not underestimate indoctrination. It is truly something to marvel at, how devastatingly effective it is at keeping people continuing to believe lies and bullshit. Right? If you know a bootlicker, please just remind them that they are in fact a bootlicker, and empower them, empower them in their bootlicking, because that shit never ceases to drive me up the wall.